In 2125, America had become a skyfaring nation, its economy no longer bound to soil or sea. The harvesters, thin, angular ships, floated in Jupiter's upper atmosphere, their great intake turbines humming softly as they siphoned off trace elements from the roiling clouds. The planet had become a new frontier, not for colonization, but for extraction. A lifeline of rare bioions, trace superhelium, and vapor metals flowed back to Earth, feeding industries, fueling fleets, and lining the pockets of those bold enough to endure the pressure. The Kestrel 9 was one of over 100 ships drifting above Jupiter's thunder belts, captained by Mira Halloway, ex-NASA engineer turned private contractor. She didn't come for wealth. She came for solitude. Her crew, a collection of specialists and drifters, worked 12-hour shifts managing collectors and monitoring storm fronts. On the 7th day of the red drift cycle, the clouds parted. A storm unlike anything in recorded Jupiteran history surged from the deep. The Kestrel's long-range radar caught the pressure wave an hour before it hit. Mira called all hands to the bridge, eyes trained on the roiling darkness approaching from the southwest quadrant. "Brace for it," she warned, voice calm as the first shockwave slammed the hull. But the storm didn't just tear through the sky. It pulsed, rhythmic, organic, like breath. And then came the shapes. Something living moved within the turbulence. Not dust, not gas, but creatures. Long, translucent forms spiraled through the clouds, some glowing faintly, others gliding like whales through air. They were alive and watching. The crew stood silent, the storm dimming just enough to reveal the impossible. 3 creatures, massive and ethereal, floated around the Kestrel. Bioluminescent pulses shimmered along their bodies, reacting to each other in rhythmic flashes. It looked like language, a greeting or a warning. "Jesus," whispered Eli Moreno, lead xenobiologist. "They're not from a void. They were born here. This is their world." The Kestrel sensors lit up with anomalies. The creatures gave off energy signatures far beyond any known life form. Some readings matched rare isotopes they had been harvesting. Only these weren't naturally occurring. They were biological. Meaning, Mira muttered, they're the source. The implications were staggering. These beings were not just alive. They were the generators of the very resources humanity came here to extract. Harvesting Jupiter might mean killing intelligent life. Command back on Earth wouldn't care. The government contracts were ironclad. Output was down across 3 belts. If they reported this discovery, they'd lose control of the grid. And yet, hiding it risked extinction-level fallout if these creatures retaliated. Mira convened a vote. "Do we preserve?" she asked. "Or profit?" The crew's silence echoed louder than the storm. Transmission was impossible. The storm had fried the comms relay back to the orbital tether. Mira ordered repairs, but it would take 48 hours to establish a hard line. Meanwhile, the Kestrel followed the largest of the creatures as it drifted deeper into a calmer pocket of the atmosphere. A void within the storm. Inside, light bent strangely. Pressure stabilized. The air shimmered with suspended particulate matter, bioluminescent spores swirling like pollen. Eli ran a scan. This is an ecosystem. They're not just surviving here, they're cultivating it. The implications deepened. Jupiter wasn't just a gas giant. It was alive. Its storms, its cloud layers, its electrical fields, they weren't just weather. They were biology. These creatures weren't anomalies. They were integral to the planet's function. But greed is a loud voice in the human heart. Jared Knox, resource ops lead, pushed back. "We can't go dark. If we sit on this, and Earth finds out later, they'll bury us. You want to be the crew that tanked America's supply chain?" Mira didn't flinch. "You want to be the crew that started an interspecies war?" The storm outside growled. As the Kestrel descended deeper, they passed structures. Yes, structures, half visible in the clouds. Not built, grown. Towers of soft material shaped like coral, spiraling downward in perfect Fibonacci patterns. The crew stared. Jupiter wasn't a planet. It was a cradle. Jupiter's biology was symphonic. It didn't exist in isolation. The spores, the wind creatures, the pressure-borne lights, all functioned together like an organism. A vast, floating biosphere miles deep and possibly millions of years old. And humanity was puncturing it with drills. The Kestrel had to make a decision. Eli began mapping the neural signatures of the creatures. Their flashing pulses grew in pattern and complexity. The largest entity, the one they now call the Architect, seemed aware of their presence. It circled close to the Kestrel, brushing the hull with tendrils of ion-charged mist. Then contact. The ship's AI triggered a security freeze. A wave of data, unlike any code, hit their system. Mira watched in stunned silence as the Kestrel's main screen filled with cascading symbols. Not human, not even mathematical, but beautiful. They're trying to talk, Eli breathed. Jared stepped back. This is a trap. We're being scanned. It's not a weapon, Mira said, slowly. It's a gift. Behind them, a soft vibration began to hum through the deck. The Architect was singing, and the Kestrel was listening. The song destabilized the crew. Not mentally, but emotionally. Memories surfaced, vivid and raw. Mira saw her father, long dead, standing on a Montana cliff. Jared remembered the face of his daughter. Eli wept openly, lost in the smell of wild rain on a college campus he hadn't seen in years. The Architect wasn't just broadcasting data. It was unlocking something. Humanity had reached into the stars, and the stars had reached back, gently, like a hand brushing a cheek. That night, while the storm quieted, the crew sat on the observation deck, silent, overwhelmed by what they had seen and felt. Something inside each of them had changed, but not all were ready to let go. Jared sent a private signal to a nearby harvester vessel, the Chariot, falsely reporting a crash and requesting emergency salvage rights. He didn't want peace. He wanted ownership. And as the Chariot responded, full throttle, the skies of Jupiter began to rumble again, not from the storm, but from the awakening. The Chariot arrived within 10 hours. A sleek, corporate-owned vessel. It carried a crew of 10 and the cold authority of the bio-harvest conglomerate. Captain Dane Rourke, ex-military and notoriously loyal to Prophet, hailed the Kestrel 9 as it loomed into visual range. Received your emergency ping. Looks like you're still breathing. Halloway, care to explain? Mira narrowed her eyes. We didn't send that signal. But Rourke wasn't listening. The Chariot's drones had already begun scanning the atmosphere. Jared Knox stood silently behind Mira, his guilt masked by a datapad he refused to look up from. They'll dissect this place, Eli warned. You have to tell them. But Mira hesitated. The Architect floated outside the Kestrel, calm but observant. A storm was building again, not from nature, but from decisions. By nightfall, Rourke's crew had deployed collectors. They didn't care about the alien structures or the song encoded in the clouds. All they saw was untapped profit. Eli intercepted a packet being relayed back to Earth. Genetic samples, resource values, and a preliminary acquisition request. They're trying to claim it as property. That was the fracture point. Mira made a decision. We're cutting them off. Mira initiated blackout mode, standard in the event of biohazard containment. It blocked external signals, jammed frequency bands, and shut down outward comms. The Kestrel was effectively invisible, but Rourke wasn't naive. He deployed armed drones, sending them into the lower cloud bands to find the source of the anomalies. Meanwhile, his engineers began constructing a temporary rig, a floating platform designed to harvest on a larger scale. Eli confronted Mira in the lower deck. They'll kill it, all of it. And when Earth finds out what we found, they'll justify it. They'll call it controlled ecological disruption. They don't understand, Mira said. They never did. She moved quickly. The Kestrel's AI, semi-autonomous and language adaptive, had begun forming primitive translations of the Architect's energy pulses. It wasn't English. It was something deeper, emotional resonance layered over harmonic structures. It conveyed feeling more than thought. The message was simple. We are not alone. We are one. Jared, consumed by regret, finally cracked. I sent the signal. I thought maybe we could control it. Maybe we'd be heroes. Mira didn't respond. Outside, the Architect was no longer alone. Dozens more had appeared, Smaller, more agile life forms gliding in symmetrical patterns around the kestrel and the chariot. The planet had taken notice. Jupiter responded like a wounded giant. The storm wall reformed, towering across the skyline in a vertical cyclone of gold and crimson. Bolts of ionized plasma ripped across the sky, illuminating the fleet in searing flashes. One of Rourke's drones vanished instantly, vaporized. The chariot pulled back, but not far enough. The architect's kin moved in clusters, weaving through the storm, releasing clouds of charged spores. Not an attack, but a warning. Inside the kestrel, the AI translated another pulse. Stop. Too much. Hurts. It wasn't just communication. It was pain. Eli knelt by the viewport. They're screaming. Rourke, now convinced of the alien presence, activated containment protocols. He launched harpoons toward the architect, intending to trap and extract the being using reinforced energy nets. The net deployed. The architect shuddered, and the sky erupted. From beneath the lower pressure bands, a new entity emerged, 10 times larger than any seen before. Its body stretched for miles, trailing bioluminescent fins and rotating rings of light around its core. Ellis' voice shook. That's not a creature. That's a guardian. The kestrel's lights dimmed. The planet had activated its immune system. Panic gripped the chariot. Rourke ordered a retreat, but half his crew refused. They had seen too much. One of his lieutenants, a young tech named Rivers, broadcast a distress beacon, not to Earth, but to the other harvesters. The planet is alive. We've made contact. We need guidance, not extraction. But Earth wouldn't wait. Satellites had already intercepted fragments of the transmission. The situation would escalate. If the bioharvest conglomerate deemed Jupiter a protected zone, they'd lose trillions. That wouldn't happen. Inside the kestrel, Mira addressed her crew. We can't hold the secret. Not forever. But we can buy time. We show them something they can't ignore. Ellis' eyes widened. A demonstration? No, Mira said. A communion. That night, under the radiance of drifting spore clouds, the architect connected again. This time, willingly. Using the kestrel's own sensor rays, it infused the ship's systems with data, impossible knowledge, ecological designs, planet-scale engineering, healing frequencies. The crew felt it in their bones. Humanity was infants compared to what these beings knew. Jared, finally understanding, walked to the bridge. What now? Mira looked at the stars above. Now we choose who we become. Earth finally responded. A command beacon pierced the ionosphere, loud, coded, and aggressive. A carrier fleet was en route. 6 days out. They'd arrive with harvesters, marines, and a writ of planetary domain. Mira stood alone in the observation chamber, the architect pulsing softly outside like a living lighthouse. They'll come, she whispered. The AI confirmed. Their velocity indicates high aggression. Strike teams on board. Eli joined her. Then we tell them. Everything. They began compiling data, the atmospheric intelligence, the proof of communication, the harmonic biolanguage. Not for the conglomerate, not for profit, but for the people. The kestrel will become a transmitter. The architect helped. Using its own energy fields, it boosted the ship's signal, wrapping it in quantum patterns a fleet couldn't block. The message broadcast was simple. Jupiter is alive. We are not alone. Do not harvest. Learn. Back on Earth, screens lit up. In homes, labs, news feeds, and underground networks, the transmission spread, unfiltered and censored. Humanity had reached beyond the veil of silence, and something had reached back, kindly but firmly. 6 days left. 6 days until the fleet arrived. 6 days to prepare for either revelation, or war. Time stretched in the void. The fleet was 5 days out. The atmosphere remained strangely still. No more storms. No new pulses from the architect. Just silence, heavy and waiting. Inside the kestrel, the crew was restless. They'd done what no human had done before, spoken with another intelligence. But the world outside seemed to be holding its breath. Eli analyzed the last transmission. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. Mira nodded. They're hiding. Even the architect had vanished into the lower bands. leaving only faint traces in the ionosphere. The storm cradle had gone dim. Jared reviewed a playback of Earth's news feeds. The leaked transmission had spread, fast and uncontrollably, across the U.S. Debates were raging. Congress was in emergency session. NASA's old name had resurfaced. A public movement had begun. Protect the Skyborne. But it wouldn't stop the fleet. They were too close and too armed. The Kestrel had become more than a ship. It was now the last line between preservation and extinction. And Mira knew it. We have 4 days, she told her crew, to turn this into something they can't kill. The Kestrel descended. Mira led her team into the lower atmosphere, navigating through dense bands of ammonioized fog and suspended electromagnetic vortices. It was dangerous, but it was the only way to find the Skyborne again. They passed glowing coral structures. Twisting light pillars spun around them, generating gravity pockets. They weren't random formations. They were cities. Eli whispered, "We're not visitors here. We're trespassers." A pulse rippled through the clouds, a harmonic wave that reverberated through the ship's hull. The architect had returned, but it wasn't alone. Dozens of Skyborn surrounded the Kestrel, their bodies weaving in synchronized orbit. Mira raised her hand toward the glass. "They're waiting for us to decide." The AI translated another message. "Learn or burn." The ship followed the largest Skyborn into the depth of the core, a zone no man's ship had ever entered. There, within a cocoon of stillness, floated the Skyborn source. A structure, not a being. Not alive in the way they knew it, but powerful, ancient, and beating like a heart made of light. Jared's voice cracked. "That's it. That's where it all comes from. A planetary womb. And if the fleet engaged, it would die and take the planet with it." The American fleet arrived. Sleek black cruisers spread across high orbit like a mechanical storm. The command vessel, USSF Independence, launched the first wave of drones within minutes. No warnings. No delay. Full control acquisition protocol initiated. Came the broadcast. "This is a secured atmospheric asset. All rogue vessels will be neutralized." The Kestrel had no weapons. Mira activated the reflector shields. Not to fight, but to delay. If they could stall the fleet just long enough, maybe Earth would act. Maybe public pressure would crack the conglomerate's grip. But it wasn't enough. 3 interceptors launched and began targeting the coral cities in the clouds below. The Skyborn moved fast, their bodies generating harmonic shockwaves that crippled the drones midair. No one died. Yet, Eli tapped into the command frequency. "You're killing sentient life. These aren't storms. These are people. Silence." Then a new voice answered. "Dr. Moreno, this is Commander Tress of the Independence. You have violated multiple atmosphere treaties. Power down your ship. Prepare for boarding." Mira didn't respond. She initiated Echo Burst, an emergency broadcast protocol that transmitted all their collected Skyborn data directly to Earth's civilian networks. The truth was no longer a secret. It was a flood. The fleet responded with violence. Missiles streaked through the clouds, targeting a Skyborn structure near the source core. The shock wave shattered a pressure veil, triggering a reaction, fast, catastrophic. The atmosphere split. A chain event began, pulling energy from the core. Jupiter's weather spiraled out of control, twisting in gravitational currents never meant to be exposed. The Kestrel was hit. Mira held the controls, blood streaming from her scalp. The crew struggled to keep the ship level as alarms blared. Outside, Skyborn screamed not in sound but in light. One of them imploded, collapsing into pure plasma. The source core began to crack. Eli stared in horror. They didn't just live here. They are this planet. You break them, you break Jupiter. The AI sounded an alert. Planetary destabilization, stage 1. Chain reaction in progress. Mira whispered, "They've crossed the line." She ordered the Kestrel deeper into the collapse zone, not to escape, but to reach the source one last time. The heart of Jupiter burned. Inside the source core, Mira made contact. No words, no pulses, just presence and a choice. Merge. or perish. The Skyborn offered more than survival. They offered union, a neural bridge between human and Skyborn, thoughts intertwined, memories shared, evolution accelerated. But it wasn't just science. It was surrender, the end of human dominance, the beginning of something else. Eli said yes immediately. Jared hesitated. They'll erase us. Mira shook her head. No, they'll remember us. Better than we do. Outside, the Independence launched its final wave. Warheads aimed at the source. The Kestrel opened its core reactor, and Mira made the leap. The Skyborn accepted. The reactor pulsed once. A blinding flash. Then silence. From Earth's orbit, telescopes recorded the moment Jupiter dimmed. And then bloomed. Not fire, not explosion, but life. A ring of light now surrounded the planet. Harmonic fields rippled out like a planetary heartbeat. The warships went dark, their systems fried by the resonance. Humanity stared up into the night sky, and for the first time in its history listened. Jupiter was changed. The storm belts no longer howled with rage, but pulsed in rhythmic, glowing waves. The Skyborn had merged with the Kestrel's reactor energy, transcending biological boundaries. They were now part machine, part memory, part emotion. And Mira Holloway was still with them. Not dead, not human. Eli watched from the viewport, speechless. Jared sat on the floor of the damaged bridge, eyes locked on the phenomenon forming outside. A living ring now orbited the planet, a perfect lattice of light, gently rotating, resonating with soundless music. The Skyborn had translated their pain, their survival, and Mira's sacrifice into a new layer of being, a message written in planetary scale, one the fleet couldn't ignore. Commander Tress aboard the Independence tried to rally his officers, but they stood in stunned silence. Systems across the fleet were unresponsive, not destroyed, but rewritten. Interfaces now displayed symbols they couldn't interpret, commands translated into empathy. Weapons refused to fire. The Skyborn weren't fighting back. They were inviting connection. Back on Earth, the transmission from Jupiter continued, uninterrupted. Civil unrest gave way to inspiration. Across cities and settlements, humans looked to the sky and began to wonder, what if we didn't conquer the universe? What if we joined it? 3 weeks passed. The fleet remained in orbit, immobilized but unharmed. Kestrel, 9 drifted at the center of Jupiter's light ring, no longer a ship of war or science, but a monument, an embassy. Mira's consciousness had become part of the source core. She spoke through pulses now, translated by the Kestrel's AI, and felt more than heard. Her voice echoed in Ella's mind as he stood in the bridge. They don't want to be gods. They just don't want to die alone. The Skyborn had begun constructing bridges, threads of matter woven from pure energy that linked their atmospheric world to orbit. These weren't roads. They were invitations, pathways for exchange, not invasion. Earth's response was mixed. Some wanted to seal the gates and pull back. Others, scientists, artists, children, asked to go forward, to learn. Congress had no jurisdiction here anymore. The skies now belonged to something older, deeper, and wiser. For the first time in centuries, America was not leading by dominance, but by listening. A team was formed, not a military unit, not corporate, a mixed delegation of thinkers, dreamers, and healers. Eli was selected as envoy. He packed no weapons, just books, music, a recording of Mira's last message, and stepped onto the bridge of light. Jupiter bloomed. Its upper atmosphere now shimmered with city-sized structures made of woven ion crystal, floating gardens nourished by cloud particles, and Skyborn that moved in harmony like a celestial orchestra. It was no longer just a gas giant. It was alive and shared. Eli stood within one of the great halls, an organic chamber where thoughts flowed like music. The Skyborn flowed around him, their forms semi-translucent, adorned with luminous sigils that pulsed in rhythm with their guest emotions. Mira was there, or something of her, an echo, a presence. She spoke without speaking. You came not to take, but to understand. That is why you're welcome here. Back on Earth, children in schools studied the Skyborn's patterns alongside math. New technology was born, not to extract, but to integrate. Sky harmonic reactors replace fusion cores. Healing frequencies replace invasive treatments. Cities learn to float instead of burn. And America, once the first to plant flags, became the first to plant seeds of respect, of peace, of learning. Jared Knox retired quietly, teaching others how to listen instead of command. The fleet left orbit not in defeat, but in reverence. And Kestrel, 9 remained, surrounded by singing light, as the first human-built outpost in a living sky. The harvest was never the minerals. It was never the wealth. It was the understanding that the universe is not a prize to win, but a song to learn. Fade to black. In the year 2125, we reached into the heart of a storm, and it sang back. We were not alone, and we were never meant to be. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the harvested skies. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button for more content like this.